Thank you. FAA, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And actually, Shane, if it's easier for you, I am prepared to present and be able to put it in the PowerPoint mode.
Okay, thanks.
If that makes your life easier.
It should have been displayed in PowerPoint mode now, so I'll look into that while you take over and present. Thank you very much. Good morning, Teresa.
Hello. Good morning, good evening. Spoke too soon. Oh no, okay, so now I can share. So I think you are seeing the version where there's a preview. Is that correct?
No, it looks normal. PowerPoint slideshow display to us now.
Okay, so it's just the screen with the PowerPoint. Okay, great. I wanted to make sure I didn't have to swap the view. So hello everyone, Teresa Brewer from the United States, from the FAA, and this is a briefing with some analysis on the PBCS non-compliance investigation. So a quick overview of the briefing. I'm going to go through the monthly non-compliance monitoring process for anyone that has not seen that before, just a quick review, and then some updates on recent results for the Oakland FIR. And then I have a few slides just showing some more detailed analysis of performance issues observed by media delivery path, and then ending with a summary. So this is a flow chart that shows, and I've showed this before, but again, for anyone that has not seen it, this is a high-level overview of how the monthly non-compliance process works. So what we do is compile a 3-month rolling sample. So for example, in March, we would look at data from January through March, February through April, data for the month of April. And then the good part about that is that we can have a larger set of data to look through. But the tricky part about it is that when you look at the data, for example, here in March to May, you still have some data from previous monitoring periods in there. So we've noticed that we have to be careful of checking to see if the aircraft have flown in all 3 months, and then any differences that there may be in those 3 months that can contribute to the overall performance for that period. And then we identify any airframes that have the performance below 95% for RSP 180 and or RCP 240, recognizing that we have both 95% and 99.9% requirements. We've started the process by focusing on the 95% as we move forward with the process, and try to make sure that we have the resources to focus on the most problematic aircraft underperformance. And then once we have that list of airframes below 95%, we check to see if the aircraft has filed P2 and RSP 180, because obviously that would mean that they have gotten the approvals that would make them eligible for reduced separation. And they would be the ones that we want to focus on. And then we investigate the issue further, and for issues for aircraft that did file the P2 and RSP 180, we submit through this process to the relevant regional monitoring agency. However, there are some cases where an aircraft, even though it did not file P2 RSP 180 and does not have that reduced separation being applied, the data link performance, again, in some cases, can be so poor that it affects operations even for just regular data link and makes it challenging for ATC. So those cases, we would then submit a problem report to the FANCRA for further investigation. So then once we do the analysis at the air traffic service provider level, we would send the reports through to the designated regional monitoring agency. So in the case of Oakland Airspace, the regional monitoring agency is PARMO. So we would send the report to PARMO, and then they would send that on to potentially whatever RMA is represents the state of the operator in the report, and then on to the state, and then to the operator for corrective action. And this process was similar to, was trying to build on the processes that are used for the regional monitoring agency analysis of altimetry system error and other types of errors that are looked at through the RMAs. And I think this group is pretty well aware, but this is just a chart we keep in here. Just to show the global nature of the RMAs and why they were kind of tagged with this or asked to do this additional work when it comes to PBCS, just so that there was the ability to make use of the existing network of communication to be able to reach, for any airspace, to be able to reach the states around the world and the operators around the world. So this slide shows something everyone should also be familiar with, a sample non-compliance report form. So this is what we would send on to the RMAs, and this is what should eventually make it to the state and the operator to give them a listing of which aircraft were observed to be a problem, and then what the details were for the problem. And then this column here, all the way to the right, the issue code. This translates to another worksheet in the report that explains what those codes mean and what types of issues were identified in the analysis. And then another important thing to note up here is this contact email address for the reporting air traffic service provider. This is a key piece of information for the operator to know who they can go to for more information and more data if needed to help with the investigation. Because you can see in the previous slide, the chart, the process kind of flows one way, and then there's sometimes difficulty in feedback between the operator and the air traffic service provider. So it's important that the contact information is there and there's the ability to get in touch with each other. So here are some of the considerations that we've come up with for determining whether or not to put an aircraft on the non-compliance report. If you're using, as I mentioned earlier, if you're using a 3-month rolling data sample, was the aircraft observed in the most recent month? And if so, was the performance different in that month? So we have noticed a few cases where an aircraft was reported a few times and we saw the issue correct itself within the period. So even though they may have looked like they were below 95% for the period, just looking at the statistics, when we go and look in the data, we can see that whatever the issue was that was observed for the first month or two did resolve within the period, and then the performance looked better after that. And then was the underperformance observed or reported in a previous monitoring period or in another flight information region? That would help to assess the scope of the issue, and it makes it more clear that there is an issue when you see it continuing from period to period. And then how many messages were observed and from how many flights. That's important, obviously, to be sure that there actually is a problem and it's not just, if there's just one flight in the period, it's very difficult to know, as Rochelle was saying yesterday, whether there's an actual issue or there was just a problem on that one flight. And then was the issue observed intermittently or were there multiple periods of consecutive delayed messages? So if we see issue like the VHF SAT transitions, if we just see a message or two occurring with a delay here and there right around a SAT VHF transition, it's not as concerning as when we see periods of more consecutive delays occurring. And then does the issue appear to have only affected one flight? So this could just be that they had a problem with their equipment on one aircraft, or the crew had difficulties with one flight, and then you can see on subsequent flights the problem appears to be resolved. And then the last question there, just does it appear to have been resolved within the monitoring period? And that's sometimes what we would try to do is go back to the operator and say, did you make any corrections during the period? Because that helps us to be confident that if the issue was actually resolved. Otherwise, we try to figure out what changed between the periods that would have changed the performance. And that just helps us to know whether it's something we need to keep looking at or if it's something that has truly been resolved. So just try to give an idea of what we're looking at with this process, looking at the past 6 months. Again, we are using a 3-month rolling sample. So for June, the data we looked at would have been from April, May, and June. So you can see at the top row here how many data link aircraft we observed by looking at that we observed using data link, and then the second row shows how many had at least 100 data points that would help us have some level of confidence that if we did notice an underperformance, that we had enough data to make that assessment. And then how many were observed below the 95%, and you can see the number drops off quite a bit. And then even more so when we see who filed P2 RSP 180. And then what we would do is this row here with the filed P2 RSP 180, filed P2 and RSP 180, we would look in detail at each of those aircraft to see what was going on, if it was something significant. And a lot of these we noticed are very close to the 95%. And when you look at the data, there just doesn't seem to be a compelling reason to submit through the process. And I think one of the reasons for that is that most aircraft at some point are going to be affected by the VHF SAT transitions, and it can depend which routes they're flying, and depending on the airspace, how frequently they're hitting areas with VHF SAT transitions. So when we're talking about how many aircraft actually get reported and notify the regulator, it's a very small number for us at this point. And here's a list. This is the table I mentioned earlier from the report. This is where you explain, this is the sheet that explains the issues. So the number there, and then what the description of the issue is, some further details, and then where you can find recommendations for addressing the issue based on the FAN CRA historical analysis and their recommendations. As Rochelle briefed yesterday, this is where this NatOps bulletin is where you can find the problems laid out and then what the recommended resolutions are depending on your aircraft type. So the top issues that we are seeing, number one by far is delayed reports around VHF SAT transitions. We also continue to see some aircraft having issues with delayed reports by HF media. In some cases, like Paul mentioned yesterday, this is just one flight maybe that had a problem, and then the issue does not appear to have continued on subsequent flights. But sometimes we do see this persisting, and there is some change that needs to be made with the aircraft manufacturer. And then the third most common issue we see is an issue either with Inmarsat or Iridium. And it's not always clear in that case whether it's the aircraft issue or the network. So these are the ones that need some additional analysis. Okay, so now switching gears a little bit. Every 6 months, we do a little bit more detail on the airspace level. So the monthly process really focuses on the specific aircraft performance. And then every 6 months, when we have some more data together, we drill down a bit more for the media types, the path, the message delivery paths. So I just wanted to share a few slides on some analysis that I did this time with the media delivery paths. So this is a listing for Oakland airspace, the actual surveillance performance, and the period I was looking at was January to June of 2021. So you can see here listed the path identifier, what type of media path it was, the message counts, and then the performance. So the top path that I observed underperforming, where there were a significant amount of data points, was this OTH, and that's a VHF media path. And you can see there that less than 90% of the messages were getting delivered within 90 seconds, and just over 95% within 180 seconds. So I wanted to look a little more at that, and I actually also noted that this VDL mode 2 path, the same station, was also in the top of the list. So I investigated those two together. So the first thing I did was I plotted the data for all the ADSC messages delivered over this path during that period. And I noticed here, actually looking at this with a few other colleagues that have been helping with this work, noticed that there were some interesting patterns when it came to the routings of aircraft. So you can see here that some of the messages were for flights that were transiting through and going away from the coast, but then there were some that were on routes going along the coast there. So digging a little more into it, wanted to see if it was more of a aircraft or operator issue. So I did notice that there were a couple of operator and aircraft type pairs that had a higher percentage of the delayed messages using this path than they had overall contributing to using this path. So those are the ones that I focused on digging into a little more. So specifically this path, specifically this fleet, CCA, the 77W, during the period, and I'm sorry, this should actually say January to June 2021. During this period, there were a little over 5,700 messages observed, and you can see the overall performance during that period was below the 95%. But what's interesting here is you can see that for the most part, when these aircraft are in Oakland, they're using these routes that are going along the coast. So you can see these routes are operating in VHF media transition areas for a longer period of time than routes that would just be leaving and going out into the ocean. As opposed to this aircraft operator, which was also on the list of a significant amount of delays when using the OTH path over here. So you can see right there that they have a high concentration of delayed reports. And I'm sorry, the yellow is just a plot of the ADSC reports, and then the red arrows are where the reports were greater than 90 seconds. So you can see overall, this operator aircraft pair is meeting the requirements in the airspace. But when you drill down just into this particular message delivery path, they were struggling. And you can see it's because of these times where they're operating for longer periods of time along the coast there, where they would be continuing to try VHF. And then when you look at the data overall, once they get out into the ocean, there's much less of an issue once they're firmly on SATCOM. So it makes it look like they are operating just fine, but they do have this issue when they're in that area. And similarly, this operator, this fleet has no issues meeting the performance requirements overall, but then when they're operating on these routes, you can see they're having much more of a challenge with the delayed reports. So just looking at the analysis conclusions from that, from those last few slides, the underperformance observed for the OTH and OTHV paths appears to be due to the distance from oceanic routes that parallel the coast. So certain routes keep aircraft in proximity to the VHF-SAT transition area longer, and then the aircraft would, by design, keep trying to use VHF. So when I drilled down to the aircraft operator, at first it appeared that there were certain fleets that were problematic, but then once I plotted the routes for the fleets with the high and low failure rates, I could see that the aircraft flying on the routes where they're in proximity to those VHF stations longer have a higher percentage of delays versus aircraft that fly on those routes that are more quickly transitioning to SATCOM. I'm not going to read this slide, but this is just copy paste from the NatOps Bulletin revision 1 that I mentioned earlier. And these are the 3 solutions that Rochelle touched on in her presentation during the meeting yesterday. So these were the 3 options. And again, as Rochelle said, the different options don't apply to every single aircraft. So it would be important to reach out to the manufacturer or maybe at first the CRA, just to see what options were available for your particular aircraft. And then one other common issue is the configuring the operator requirements tables, the ORT tables, properly. So we do see some issues. It's not a significant it's not significantly used in the airspace, but you can see here on the left, I circled in red the overlap area between some of the satellites that have coverage over the Pacific airspace. And you can see that this pink coverage here is for a satellite region that covers more of the United States and the North Atlantic region. So when aircraft come into the Pacific airspace, you can see in some cases they're continuing to try to use that satellite. And for the most part, it's okay, but there are some delays observed, and that path tends to fall below the 95%. So just a little bit of drill down for that. It's not all operators and aircraft types using that. So this is another case where just wanted to remind everyone of the Ops Bulletin, the NatOps Bulletin, data link performance improvement options, just in terms of maximizing access to the classic Aero Ground Earth Station services. Proper configuration of the ORT table is vital for maximizing availability of SATCOM services. And so the last slide here. So the monthly noncompliance reporting process is underway for the FAA Oceanic Airspace. I will note that for anyone that is paying attention or involved with the domestic data link for the United States, it's 2 completely separate processes. PBCS monitoring is for the FAA at this time is just for the oceanic airspace, Oakland, Anchorage, and New York. After further investigation, there are a negligible number of aircraft with performance issues that are found to be significant enough to report. We are seeing some repeat offenders that can make it unclear if the reports are getting to the state and or the operator. So we need to firm up the process between the RMAs and the states and the air traffic service providers, just making sure that the non-compliance reports are getting through to the operators so that they can be aware and make the corrective action. In the case of the repeat offenders, what's most concerning is when we see them continue to file P2 and RSP 180, so they're continuing to show as eligible for the reduced separation. And that's where, we just have to remind, in the case of FAA, we've been working closely with our regulators to remind them that, or to have them remind the operators that when they are showing continuous problems and the issue has not been corrected, that they should not be filing. Typically, they're allowed to continue using data link if the issue is not too significant, it's not causing a major operational impact. They can use the data link as opposed to HF voice, but they should not be filing P2RSP 180 until they can meet the performance requirements. Again, the most common problems are the delays in the VHF SAT transition areas, HF data link, and then the Inmarsat and Iridium specific issues. The observed issues by media delivery path are generally traced to specific aircraft avionics or the design of routes in relation to VHF SAT transition areas. And this piece down here is important because there is little VHF coverage in the Oakland airspace. Depending on the routes flown, VHF SAT transition issues for a fleet or aircraft can be masked due to the aggregate nature of the PBCS monitoring. So this is where it becomes, I think Rochelle talked about this at the end of her presentation yesterday, it becomes more of an ATC operational concept design issue, doing things like having routes right near, data link routes right near transition areas to VHF can be problematic, and aircraft are going to continue to fail in those areas, even though they might be overall meeting the requirements in the airspace. Whenever they're operating in those areas, in certain cases, they're going to be continuing to have problems. So it just becomes a larger question of, how to address that, rather than waiting for the individual aircraft to fail and then they change and, perform one of the recommended options. But then all the other aircraft that appear to be fine are also problematic in those areas and just continue to be a problem. So I guess that's the larger question that needs to be answered. But that is all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Teresa, for very comprehensive and very nicely set up the presentation for the understanding of the attendees. I now open the floor for questions for Teresa. Any questions or comments from the floor? If not, then I have a question for Teresa. For slide number 11 onwards to 14, how do you collate the position of the aircraft and have it charted out? Is it some form of software that is internal software that you use to chart this?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that it's actually much less sophisticated than that. I am mostly working alone on this stuff, so I just kind of do it the best way I know how. I just make text files with the positions that I want to plot, and then I import them into Google Earth.
Oh, I see. So it's a manual process that you extract the
Yes.
Of the position report, the lag and long, or the messages, and then is manually indicated on this?
Yes. So I create files with the positions that I want to, I extract the specific ones for, in this case, all the positions where the message was delivered over OTH, and then I import that file using the Google Earth function to import.
A lot of work, especially slide 14. I can see one whole series of updates.
Yeah, so this one's especially fun because I have to create 2 files. I create the one with all the positions, and then I create a second file with just the delays. And I know that there has to be software out there to do it better. I just don't have those skills, and I don't have access to anyone with those skills just now. So.
Okay, thank you. I will contact you offline for more detailed questions on this. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor, please? If not, thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. And if anyone ever has questions, after you look at this and digest it a bit, and if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out over email.
Okay, next up, we have working paper number 17, which is the Asia-Pac region combined PBCS monitoring report that is presented by China/FAA.
Hello.
Just hang on, please. Mr. Secretary, could I have working paper 17 up on the screen, please?
Stand by.
China, the floor is yours.
Hello. Let's see. Perhaps there could be some communication jams here for now. Do you think it's should I go on or perhaps wait for a while until the let's go on anyway, shall we?
Yeah, the presentation is on the screen.
Yep, definitely. So let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And this is Yang from China to present the 2020 FeedAsia Data Link Performance Report, jointly prepared by CEC, HMB, and the FAA colleagues. Special thanks to our FAA colleagues and Mr. Shen's kind support throughout the whole task. They were really helpful during the whole process. And this slide is rather different from the original report, the WP17, which you can find on the FeedAsia 11 website. So this slides are generally generated based on the attachment of the original document WP17, and the analysis was not included in the normal original paper, working paper 17. So the slides will be a good chance for the floor to have a further discussion or share of ideas of the tendency of the data as well as the common issues, because I guess there should be some more analysis presented in these slides, which is not included in the original report. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is obviously it's a contents page and gives a really quick look at what the slides include. So this is not going to be a very long presentation. It's just basically made of 5 sections. The first section is the FR supporting this program. It's basically just a list. And the second is the ASP consolidated section. So it's easy to understand. Basically, it summarizes regional RSP compliance status and looks at the overall tendency of the data points and the performance. So the meeting serves a good chance to review the ups and downs of the data, basically based on the figures and graph presented in these slides, and perhaps recognize new challenges, if any. Well, the third section demonstrates the ASP issues. The ASP issues are actually also presented in the original document. Yet it could be too long, so we'll try to find the common issue that seems to solve perhaps in near futures that's perhaps related to different stakeholders that's involved this program. The fourth section, the ACP consolidated section, is a counterpart of the second section, obviously. And the difference that is for the ACP consolidation, that means it discusses the overall performance against the RCP compliance, and also its compliance status tendency. Well, we also have some similarities and shared features in the section 204, as well as in their their features of the tendency. But there are also some difference to stress. So the last section is.
Sorry, China, I interrupt for what is your slide presentation? You have a different slide, or is still on the same slide? Because I don't see any movement in the slide.
Nope, there's no animation.
Oh, okay. So you are still on the same slide, right? I just want to be sure.
Yep, definitely. It's just it's basically to describe for each section. So
okay.
We don't mess up with the structure. Thank you.
Okay,
so the next section is basically a counterpart of the ASP's issues. So next slide, please. Thank you. So this graph is definitely the reporting FRs involving in this APAC Combined Performance Reports program. Yet Myanmar, very unfortunately, was not able to provide the data last year. So hopefully we can receive the data next year from them. And also thanks all the states and stakeholders involved for this efforts this year. Next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, this is the table that's extracted directly from the WP17. So we can see that in the first glance that 95% requirements are met for all FIR for the year of 2020. That's a very good thing. Yet most FIRs fail to meet the 99.9 requirement. But generally, we are at a rather acceptable level for the 99.9%. So that's generally another good thing, though we can still work on it to improve it a little bit. The second is the general compliance status is stable among both half of years. So we can see directly from the color, that's a good thing. And Tahiti FR, that is the NTT FR, did a very good job meeting the 99.9% requirements in the second half of the year. So a big thumb up and good job. Next slide, please. So this page about the ASP consolidated analysis for 95% requirements. So this is a figure reflecting the data points on the compliance status of the 95% requirement from the year 2019 to 2020. So we can see there are blue bars. The blue bars are the data points for each half year, and the first two blue bars are the first and second half year of 2019. FH is the first half, SH is the second half. And let's make the third and the last bar those of the 2020. So basically, this is a comparison over half years among the 2 years from 2019 and 2020. So about the orange line, it's the general compliance status of the 95 requirements against the RSP 180. So this curve is basically a weighted calculation to estimate the general, say, compliance curve. So it doesn't actually show very detailedly which region may be high, which region could be low, but it shows a compliance status over the whole region. So this is not a very complex or very detailed, and it's definitely not perfect, but it's just a very good start. Perhaps it could trigger further studies on the data, and perhaps we can do more research on it if that's possible from the stakeholders, of course. Let's go back to the figure for the 95% requirements. So we can see that the ADNC data points have been dropping ever since the first half of 2019, because though the drop of the data points in 2019 was not very significant, so we take it as a very normal ups and downs of the data. But due to the obvious reason, in the first half of 2020, it seems there's a drop, there's a cut around 40 to 50%, and the data points further dropped in the second half of 2020. So that's a change of the data points. And another good thing, there's a good thing that the ADNC 95% requirement, the compliance status, is generally increasing throughout the 2 years from the 2019 to 2020. The increase, well, it looks the rate of the increase is very similar among the 2019 and 2020 in their respective year. Well, there's a generally increase between the second half of 2019 and the first half of 2020. So from the general perspective and from the perspective of the ultimate result, I think it's a good thing. The meeting is doing a pretty good job at this work. Please feel free to stop me if the floor has anything to add, or perhaps have other ideas. Thank you. And next slide, please. So basically, the same figure. This makes the blue bar the same thing with the previous one. And the only difference that the 99.9% is also increasing throughout the 2 years. If we recall the previous tables that we presented just now, most of the FRs were yellow in the table. That means that though the 99.9% requirements were not actually perfectly met, but they were at an acceptable level. And this figure actually gives us somehow more confidence that it's indeed increasing. Perhaps one day we can reach, most of us will reach the 99% requirements, and that turn the most of the slots of the table, turn them to green. So this also gives me a good look, and I think it's a pretty good thing. Let's work on it in the future too. Next slide, please. Thank you. So back to very specific RSP issues. Again, these issues we cannot copy the full list to the slides because it's going to be too long. So from our perspective, the first thing we noticed from the table is that there was an IG1 station that was mentioned last year by our FAA colleagues that, the IG1 station was rather underperformance last year. So it's, I guess, from my perspective, I see that the IG1 station still seems under criteria remained in the 2020. So the IG1 station might need further investigation from stakeholders since there seems to be things to improve. And from the comments from Teresa, I recalled her that she said each ASP showing below 95% should plot the location of these reports delay over IG1 to see if problems correlate to the VHF set transaction areas, which I believe is also stressed in her.
I'm sorry, China, you were cut off. We cannot hear you now.
Hello?
Hello, China. Can you hear me? China, if you can hear me, you will cut off for the last 30 seconds.
Okay. 要不切那个普通麦，我过来说，就直接不直接拿笔记本麦，就它有
跟麦没关系。
可以看到他们对话吗？
I think we have you back now. Yang, are you there?
Hello， no，
他们回复了吗？
你要不跟他说一下，说要不咱再过一会儿再说，还是
China,
要不
can you hear us?
Hello，
China,
给他打一下。
要不那个，要不让他们先说，然后那个
China, we can hear you.
Hello，
We can hear you, but
要不跟他说一下，我跟下次再说，
退出会议，然后再进一下。
进一下。
对，
跟他说一下，
然后说一下。
他那什么。
Okay, China, I suggest you log out and log back in again and see if you could reconnect for the audio.
Okay.
他不是说 we can hear you 吗？
Can you hear me or perhaps not?
Yes. Now, can you hear us?
Yes, definitely. Is that
Okay, then we can continue then.
okay? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, bad luck today. Well, well, yeah. Well, and let's go back to the topic, shall we? So the IG1, perhaps. So basically, we don't know if if there's something wrong with the IG1 station itself, or perhaps it's just related to the transaction area, and perhaps it's because of certain fleets, perhaps it's software, perhaps other procedural things. So for the comments we receive from the FA colleagues, perhaps stakeholders can try to clarify. So why did this issue in the IG1 happens? So we can start the corrective actions. So I hope this made up the empty time. Okay, so another thing is that we also noticed there's a drop of the RSP data points that was stressed in the previous blue bar figure. So the constant drop of the RSP data points may interfere in the individual analysis. So though some of the ground stations and operators were in compliance, perhaps it's recommended to keep the data and performance monitored for now to determine the further actions, because though the data points for the whole region was basically halved, but the data point for the whole general region is still acceptable for the PBCS framework to monitor, but the change of very specific stakeholders or the entity could somehow impact the accuracy and the validation of the data. So perhaps we can, if we are not actually sure if certain entity or stakeholders require more actions or instant actions for now, perhaps we can keep them monitored first. So perhaps recommend investigate in complying with more stable data points over the half years. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a number of operators also filled this performance requirements for the whole year. So stakeholders could consider looking into the issue if the monitoring results remain unimproved this year, which is quite similar to the conclusion just now. The old story, the HF results hardly achieved the RSP 240D requirements in several FRRs, as is demonstrated in the table below. Next slide, please. Thank you. And by the way, please feel free to text in the box or speak if you find the mic's broken again. Thank you. The compliance status for the ACP data. Again, it was rather stable for the whole year. Yet we could also notice that the data points in the ZLLL and the ZWW in China was there was a dropping to a lower level. So we'll have a look into it. And also our efforts this year was stressed in the IP03 in the PBCS progress. Hope it could be improved. And also 95% are generally reached, so that's a good thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. Well, similar figure, but rather different results. There's basically 95% requirement for the ACTP. We do want to exclude the human factors from these figures, so we choose ACTP for this figure. So blue bar still remains the data points, but this time for VDLC communication. And we do see there is a more obvious ups and downs in this figure. So since the second half of the 2019, the CBDLC message counts, the data points dropped. It's quite similar due to a similar reason. And obviously the performance decreased in the year of 2019. Well, again, I believe it's rather normal ups and down. So I don't think there could be some very significant issues or problems to solve by now. But because we can see that the performance generally rose in 2020, though there was another little drop into the second half of the 2020, the overall performance in 2020 still surpassed in 2019 due to different reasons, perhaps. But this also gives us confidence. We can still work on it, and we are on the right track. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is 99% requirements. So it has a very similar tendency with the last figure, except for the rise was more obvious. And well, again, this 99.9% requirements in 2020, though there's a drop in the year, it's generally higher and much better than that of the 2019. So another good news that is. Next slide, please. When we talk about the RCP issue, the first thing we encounter is that the RCP compliance media, when the in compliance data slides in RCP is rather different from the RSP because the in compliance reasons and entities are much more divergent than the RSP issues, especially for the 99.9% requirements. So the first ring is the for the RSP media that was not compliant for the whole year of 2020. So 88% were HF in compliance, and 6% of HF, 6% SETCOM. So they are basically big three in the ring. Yet the second, obviously, is the RCP requirements in compliance against the 99% requirements. So there are HF, SETCOM, VHF, VHF set, set VHF, HF set, set HF, and HF VHF. Well, we have several. That's 7 to 8 different medias that were not that didn't actually met the 99.9% requirement, and they were under criteria. So the conclusion is so the early conclusion is that it might make the investigation on the RSP issues somehow more complex than the RSP issues. Don't know if that will work, but this somehow showed that when we are looking at the RSP issues, the CBDRC operations, perhaps there are more media segment involved. Perhaps more stakeholders may have to take part into the corrective actions. Next slide, please. So another thing we noticed that is different from the RSP issue is that so the port requirements were not met by a number of operators. So from here, I'll stress that the operators may first investigate their avionics systems or software updates in case some of the updates or additions were missed. If the avionics systems are well and properly set, consider reaching the operators to stress the SARP described in the Gold Manual and to improve their data link cooperation if possible. And next slide, please. So most of the operators met the RCP 240 95% requirements. More efforts should be done to improve the 99.9% requirements because we can see clearly that we didn't have the head of the table. So all the green pillars in this table are 95% requirements, acceptable for the fifth column. That's for the port. So it's obvious that the 99.9% requirements were not met as well as the 95%. So we can try to figure out that, try to figure out how to improve that if possible. So another thing I want to stress again, during the whole process, it should be noted that influence of the data points for individual station performance can be massive. So it's rather hard to identify the exact stations or operators to start the corrective actions. So I want to quote Rochelle for yesterday's presentation. The 300 to 350 message counts or data points might be helpful for the CRA to do the investigation job. So another thing is it's also recommended to start a more accurate identification on issues after the data points remain stable. Next slide, please. All right. Thank you. That's the thank you page. Any questions, please, from the floor?
Thank you very much, China. Good work for the first report. I can see a lot of work is put in, and a lot of effort is put in. Now I invite comments and questions from the floor on China's presentation.
Hi, this is Teresa. If I could just say it's a great job on the report, and it was nice working with you in the transition.
Thank you. You are very the FA colleagues and Mr. Chen is are very helpful throughout the whole process. So I sincerely appreciate your support. Thanks again.
Any other comments or questions from the floor, please, for China? Shan, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. And I'd just like to echo the comments from Teresa also, and congratulate China on the output of what's been a very significant task for them to undertake voluntarily on behalf of Fit Asia. So thank you, Yang, and your team, and a very impressive first effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and well done, China. And we now move to the next paper, working paper 8, which is a data link performance report for Kuala Lumpur FIR.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's Hanif from Malaysia. How do you read?
Loud and clear. And once the presentation is on the screen, you may proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. So I'm Hanif Rahman. I'll be presenting this paper. I'll be presenting paper on the data link performance data from January to December 2020 for the Kuala Lumpur FIR. And this paper presents the data link performance for Kuala Lumpur FIR from January 2020. Overall performance observed in the 2020 against both RSP 180 and RCP 240 specifications is acceptable. Availability was affected by numbers of outages throughout the period. Okay, for the ADSC RSP 8, this section covers the downlink latency measurements for ADSC messages sent throughout the Lampur FIR for the whole year of 2020, categorized by the data link, media type, and remote ground stations and ground earth stations. The performance, can we go to the table number 1, please? Scroll a bit down. Yeah, so to highlight, throughout throughout 2020, the significant data that we would like to present is the HF, which did not meet the 95% criterion, but this might be due to the lack of messages that is received by HF. As for the ground stations, there are three VHF. Okay, scroll a bit down. Thank you. For the ground stations, there are 4 ground stations that did not meet the 999 criteria. 3 of which are VHF, which is the Penang, Subang, and Kuantan, and 1 is the Alpha Papa Kilo, which is Alpha Papa Kilo 2, which is situated in Perth. All right, but we see an improvement of one of the Satcom stations, which is the Iridium Arizona, which in the first half of 2020 did not meet the below. Scroll a bit down. Yeah. India Golf Whiskey, which in the first half of 2020 did not meet both criteria, but on the second half, it meets the 95% criteria, but marginally accepted for the 999 criteria.
Next is the RCP 240, Kuala Lumpur FIR PDLC RCP 240 performance for the year of 2020. Overall, we meet the 95% criterion, but fall below the 99.9% criterion. And to table 4. Okay, table 4 shows the RCP 240 performance by media type. We met the 95% criterion for both ACP and ACTP, but fall below the criterion for 99.9% benchmark. Only HF media type was unable to meet both the 95% and 99.9% criterion. The message count for HF is not significant, but investigation is ongoing from our maintenance team. Move on to table 5. Okay, table 5 presents the performances of our VHF data link remote ground stations. We almost meet the 95% criterion for all the ground stations, except for the USM ground station for the second half of year 2020. For the 99.9% criterion, only BTJ1, HKT, SIN9, and USM were unable to meet the benchmark. We are investigating and monitoring these stations' performances. And it is also good to note that both the SIN8 and SIN9 ground stations had improvement from the first to the second half of year 2020. And to table 6, please. Alright, table 6 presents the Satcom station's performance against RCP 240. Again, we almost meet the 95% criterion for all the stations, except only for the APK2 station for the second half of year 2020. And for the 99.9% criterion, the stations that fell below the benchmark were APK1 and APK2 stations. Our maintenance team is investigating and monitoring these stations' performances. And do also note that the XXA station managed to improve from the first half of year to score 100% for all the criterions on the second half of 2020. Next to table 7. Okay, table 7 presents the performances of aircraft operator and aircraft type against the RCP 240 criterion. As before, only a few aircraft operator and type that did not meet the benchmark for the 95% criterion, namely Qatari Airbus 359 and Turkish Boeing 77 Whiskey. These two data were from the second half of the year when the aircraft flew fewer due to the pandemic of COVID-19. As for the 99.9% criterion, ones that did not meet the requirement were Air France and Speedbird Boeing 77 Whiskey, Etihad Boeing 789, Finnair Airbus 359, KLM Boeing 77 Whiskey, Malaysian Boeing 738, Oman Airbus 332, Qatari for all their aircraft types, Singapore Airbus 359 and Airbus 388, Turkish Boeing 77 Whiskey, and Xanadu 333. We are investigating and will submit problem reports to CRA for further investigations and actions. And that is all for the presentation of Kuala Lumpur FIR data link performance for the year of 2020. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We now open the floor to discuss any relevant matters as appropriate.
Thank you, Malaysia, for your presentation.
you.
I now invite comments or questions from the floor, please. I see none. Thank you, Malaysia. And next up will be working paper number 9, data link performance report for Chennai. And once the presentation is up, the floor is yours, India.
Thank you, Chairman. As I had requested, can we present both working paper 9 and 10 back to back and then go for the discussion?
Yes, you may do so. Thank you.
Yeah. So working paper 9, it presents the data link performance observed in Chennai FAR during the period 1st January to 31st December 2020, measured against the CPDLC RCP 240 and ADSC RSP 180 specifications. So going to para 2.1, table 1 summarizes overall ADSC performance per media type, remote ground station and ground edge station for downlinks sent within Chennai FAR during 2020. Then para 2.2, table 2 summarizes overall ADSC performance per aircraft operator type for downlinks sent within Chennai FAR during 2020. In the next paper, we will be discussing about the actions. Then coming to para 2.3, there is Chennai FAR CPDLC RCP 240 performance per media type, RGS and GES. Tables 3A and 3B summarize overall CPDLC performance per media type, RGS and GES for messages sent within Chennai FAR. So first is the Jan to June half yearly. The next one is the second half from July to December. Then next is Chennai FAR CPDLC RCP 240 performance, aircraft operator type. Tables 4A and 4B summarize overall CPDLC performance per aircraft operator type for messages sent within Chennai FAR. Now going to paper 10, working paper 10. I think we can have the discussion on working paper 10. Yeah. Working paper 10 presents data link performance data for 2020 for Chennai FIR and information on actions taken to identify and rectify the causes of performance issues. The reason working paper 9 and 10 both refer to Chennai alone is we are able to do the data link performance as of now only for the Chennai FIR. Though we have started for Calcutta, which will be in working paper 11. So going to discussion, para 2.1, table 1 summarizes overall ADSC performance per media type, remote ground station and ground earth station for downlink sent within Chennai FIR during 2020, where performance did not meet the RSP 180 performance criteria. We can see from the table that both SATCOM and VHF performance met 95% criteria and marginally satisfied the 99.9% criteria. Para 2.2. The performance of HF data link did not meet both the 95% and 99.9% criteria. The degradation in the performance of ADSC performance was mainly due to HF data link performing well below par. 2.4, the data link performance report of the Chennai data link ground system has been forwarded to the communication service provider CSP SITA for investigation. The ongoing pandemic situation has resulted in delays in collection and analysis of the data link data on a periodical basis and hence resultant delay in rectification of the poor performance. Bobasma and AI is in the process of resolving the issue in coordination with SITA. Next, coming to Chennai FIR ADSC RSP 180 performance aircraft operator and type. Table 2 summarizes overall ADSC performance per aircraft operator type for downlink sent within Chennai FIR, where performance did not meet the RSP 180 criteria. Para 2.7, out of 144 aircraft operator type combinations, 38 combinations failed to meet RSP 180 criteria. 13 combinations failed to meet both the 95% and 99.90 criteria. Next, coming to FIR, Chennai FIR CPDLC RCP 240 performance. Para 2.8, the overall CPDLC performance per media type RGS and GES for messages sent within the Chennai FIR during 2020 met the RCP 240 performance criteria. However, in few cases, it was between 99 and 99.84%. Then next, coming to Chennai FIR CPDLC RCP 240 performance per aircraft operator and type. 2.10 paragraph, only one aircraft operator type combination, Cathay Boeing 77 Whiskey, did not meet the RCP 240 criteria. Action by the meeting. The meeting is invited to note the information contained in this paper and discuss any relevant matters as appropriate. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Thank you, India, for the presentation. I invite comments and questions from the floor for India. I see no questions. Thank you, India. And the next paper, working paper 11, is also by India. It's data link performance reporting and analysis for Calcutta FIR. Once the presentation is on the screen, the floor is yours, India.
Yeah, this working paper 11 is regarding the data link performance monitoring and analysis for Kolkata FIR. Though so far India has been doing the performance monitoring analysis only for Chennai, very recently we have started doing it for Kolkata. So we did a sample 40 days analysis just to see that yes, everything is in line. So this working paper will be presented by my colleague, Mr. Masivaina. Masivaina, floor is yours.
Good morning, sir, and good morning and good afternoon for chairperson and all the participants. So today we are going to present for the Kolkata. Please, the topic, sir, the headline.
Sorry, could you say again, India, where you would like to be in this paper?
Sir, I am able to see the headline. The data and performance analysis for the Kolkata for the period of 17th June to 26th July 2021. So when we are considering the table 2.1, when you consider 2.1, almost all the aircraft satisfied the 95% criteria and 99.90% criteria. Most of the aircraft satisfied except the HF 99.02, 99.84, all the aircraft satisfied. The next table, please. When you consider the RGS and the GES, again same for RSP 180, the 95% criteria satisfied all the aircraft, almost all the aircraft. The 99.90% satisfied most of the aircraft in the meet the criteria. Some of the aircraft in the range of 19.02, 19.84. Very few aircraft not satisfy the criteria. The next table, table 2.
Are you on table 2 or table 3?
Yeah, table 3. Table 3.
Okay.
This RCP 240. Again, this data is for the period of June 17 to July 26, 2021 for the period of 40 days. When you consider the ACP and the ACTP, the ACP 95% and the ACTP 95% benchmark is satisfied by all the aircraft almost. When you consider the ACP, ACTP for the 19.9% benchmark, so most of the aircraft again satisfied. This is only for 40 days. Please, table 4. So the table 4 also RCP 240 analysis from June 17 to July 26, 2021 for the 40 days. When you consider the 95% benchmark, ACP and ACTP, the Qatari Airbus 359 and the Qatari Boeing 77 Lima not satisfied the ACTP 122nd. The aircraft ACP 180 satisfied by all the aircraft. When you consider the 99.9 benchmark, 210 second, 210 second and 150 second, 19.9% benchmark. There's only one aircraft, Qatari Airbus 359, which is reflected in the same in ACTP 95% also. Then one aircraft, Qatari Boeing 77 Whiskey, in the range of 19.0 to 19.84. All other aircraft satisfy the 95% benchmark. So thank you, sir. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, India, for the update on Kolkata. And I'd like to congratulate India because I think this is the first update we received on Kolkata FIR. I'd like to ask for comments and questions from the floor for India. Okay, I see none. Thank you very much, India. We move now to working paper number 12. Sorry, Mr. Secretary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, India, for submitting this paper, and we'll look forward to further development of the performance monitoring and analysis for Kolkata. I'm wondering if you're able to, or if one of the team is able to advise whether and when we can see some similar activity for the Mumbai FIR.
The discussion is on with the service provider with the ATM system, Raytheon, and we hope to shortly upgrade the system to be able to study the performance and make the system also compliant for the same. So we would get back to you as soon as we are able to get something positive from the provider. Thank you.
Thanks, Vasu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, India, and we look forward to the last piece of the jigsaw for India when you have the Mumbai report. Thank you, India. We now move to working paper 12, which is a data link performance report for Ujung Padang FIR, presented by Indonesia. Indonesia, the floor is yours once the presentation is up.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Just a short delay, stand by.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So here's a data link performance reporting for Ujung Pandang FIR, presented by Indonesia. Summary: this paper presents the data link performance data for 1 January to 31 December 2020 for the Ujung Pandang FIR, and information on action taken to identify and rectify the cause of performance issues. 1. Introduction. Table 1 to 6 summarize ADSC and CPDLC performance where when RSP and RCP do not meet the criteria stated in IQ 2444. Action and the outcomes to mitigate this case are also presented on this paper. In addition, Indonesia also submit the survey of the status of current and planned implementation of performance-based horizontal separation minima in Ujung Pandang FIR. Discussion. Ujung Pandang FIR ADSC RSP 180 performance. Media type RGS and GES. Table 1 summarize overall ADSC performance per media type, remote ground station and ground out station for downlink sent within the Ujung Pandang FIR during 2020, when performance did not meet the RSP 180 performance criteria. So here's table 1. Concisely, ADSC performance by SATCOM and VCHEF were able to meet the 95% criterion but fell for 99.9 criterion. As shown in table 1 above, the assessment for ADSC performance by VCHEF could not be statistically significant due to the low number of data points. For 2.3, for ADSC differentiated by RGS-GS, 3 stations had failed to meet the 95% and 99.9% criteria, which is the IG1, the NDC1, and SYD8. To improve the performance and to meet the criteria, NSP will continue monitoring the delay by RGS, GS, IG1, MDC1, and SYD8 to determine whether the problem is related to the network issues. NSP also will notify the CSP regarding the issues of RGS and GS delay. 2.6. Ujung Pandang FIR ADAC RSP 180 performance aircraft operator type. Table 2 summarize overall ADAC performance per aircraft operator type for downlink sent within the Ujung Pandang FIR during 2020 when performance did not meet the RSP 180 performance criteria. As we can see in the table, there's only one aircraft operator type. ADAC performance by aircraft operator type were able to meet the 95 criterion but unable to meet the 99.9 criterion. Whereas the ADAC differentiated by aircraft operator type, there is only one aircraft operator type, CSN A332, that is unable to meet the 95% and 99.9 criterion in July to December 2020 period. (2.8) please. The aircraft capture with low performance show that there was a data link connection problem. NSP will check whether this appears to be a problem with the particular flight or whether this is an ongoing problem. If this problem is not observed on later period, the issues may have been addressed. The ANSP will continue the monitoring to determine the problem. If it still occurs, the ANSP will take action to notify the aircraft operator. Ujung Pandang FIR CPDLC RCP 240 performance media type by RGS and GES. 2.10 Table 3A and 3B summarize overall CPDLC performance per media type RGS and GES for message sent within the Ujung Pandang FIR during 2020. When performance did not meet the RCP 240 performance criteria. So, scroll please. Okay, this is the table which we can see from there is 5 remote ground station which has data that does not meet the criteria. Next, please. Also, this is in the July to December 2020 period. Same with 5 remote ground station with not meet the criteria. Scroll please. Okay. Yeah. 2.11 Table 4A and 4B summarize overall CPDLC performance per aircraft operator type for messages sent within the Ujung Pandang FIR during 2020 where performance did not meet the RCP 240 performance criteria. It's also same. It's only one aircraft operator, the CSG A333 in Ujung Pandang in the period January to June 2020. Next. This is still more. We have more aircraft operator. So 2.12, the ACP measurement for CPDLC messages sent within the Ujung Pandang FIR for the period from 1 January 2020 to 31 December 2020 are categorized by data link media type, RGS, GS, and aircraft operator type. The ACP for messages sent via satellite and VHF meet the 95% criteria but marginally fall below the 99.9% criteria. As for the CPDLC, differentiated by RGS and GS, 5 stations had failed to meet both 95 and 99.9 criteria as follow: TWU1 XXA ZAM from period to January to June 2020 and DVO and XXQ from period July to December 2020. For the CPDLC differentiated by aircraft operators type, there are 5 pairs of aircraft operator type which fail the 95 and 99.9 criteria. CSC A333, GHH A333, CPA A359, CPA A35K, CRK A333. The CPDLC differentiation from both of RGS and geostation and aircraft operator type were caused by the delay related to specific VHF station. It happened when the delay CPDLC messages are observed via a specific VHF ground station. Other than this, the ACP which not meet the criteria also caused by the low percentage from the pilot operational response time by PO port. Based on the performance monitoring, we analyzed that the delay CPDLC transactions are caused by high large of port, and SP will notify the administrator so that the operator to review their procedure to reduce the pilot operational response time. Next, additional information. Attachment A shows the survey of the status of current and planned implementation of the performance-based horizontal separation minima for Ujung Pandang FIR. It represents the actual condition in 2021. So it's also answer as yesterday presentation by Secretary for the PFA document 7030. 3. Action by the meeting. The meeting is invited to note the information contained in this paper and discuss any relevant matter as appropriate. Could you please the attachment, Mr. Secretary? Okay, I think we just go to the last page. Okay, so here's the update for your paper, your question yesterday. So from till today, we are not yet implemented and for the 23 nautical mile lateral separation or RNP4. So that's all I can say from Indonesian paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aryan, for the presentation. I now invite questions or comments from the floor for Indonesia, please. I see none. And looking at the time right now and the progress that we have made and the remaining papers, I would propose that we break for early lunch today and still come back at 0530 UTC time. So we have an extended lunch break for today, about 1 hour, 25 minutes with your support, Mr. Secretariat.
That's fine by me, Mr. Chair. Your discretion, of course, and with the agreement of the meeting. I just wanted to, while I have the microphone, just ask a clarification question from Indonesia, if you don't mind. So regarding the 23-mile lateral separation, you have no plan to implement that, so you do not want it included in the DOC 7030 PFA. Is that correct?
Yes. Until today, we still not decided to implement the 23 nautical mile.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretariat, for the question. And with that, we will break for lunch and come back at 0530 UTC time for the second half of agenda item 4. Thank you.